introduce our guest speaker, who is Colonel retired Chuck DeBellevue, who has the distinction of being the leading ace from Vietnam with 6 kills and the last American ace to serve on active duty. Chuck was assigned in 1971 as an F-4 weapons system officer with the 555th Tactical Fighter Squadron, the Triple Nickel, at Udon Royal Thai Air Base. While he was there, he flew 220 combat missions, 96 of those over North Vietnam. And he was credited with the destruction of 6 North Vietnamese jet fighters in aerial combat, 4 MiG-21s and 2 MiG-19s. Following his combat tour, he attended undergraduate pilot training at Williams Air Force Base, and after that served in a variety of flying and staff positions until his retirement in 1998. Colonel Bellevue is a recipient of the McKay Trophy, and he and his wife received the Jerome O'Malley Award given annually to the top wing commander and spouse in the Air Force. This is kind of a unique award, and it's the only one that I know of in the Air Force or any other service where the spouse is a part of that award. And I think, and that's a great recognition of the role that for many of us, the spouse has played in our careers and our success. So congratulations to her also. Chuck is a recipient of the Air Force Cross, which is the highest decoration the Air Force can award and the nation's second highest military honor, as well as 3 Silver Stars, 3 Legions of Merit, 6 Distinguished Flying Crosses, and 18 Air Medals. Chuck lives in Edmond, Oklahoma, and is active in a number of business and veterans organizations, and is the VP for Veterans Affairs at the Seidel Chapter of the Air Force Association. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Chuck in just a second. As I said, if you have questions you'd like to send via chat in advance, that's great. And if not, we'll have an opportunity at the end. So Chuck, let me take my screen down and I'll turn it over to you. Happy to have you and ready to listen.
Sounds good. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me get set up here and we'll get started. Okay. All right. As was said, I was in the Triple Nickel Squadron back when it flew F-4s. And we had 2 people in the F-4, pilot in the front seat, and they took the pilots out of the back seat finally, which was a great thing, and put NAVs back there, weapon systems officers, or as we were commonly called, GIBs, guy in back. And we did a great job back there. To get started, let's talk a little bit about history of going into Hanoi. Rolling Thunder, back in the 65 to 68 time frame, the F-105s flew into Hanoi on a daily basis. They built 850 F-105s. Large percentages of those airplanes are still in North Vietnam. All right, the job was to interdict targets of opportunity, hard targets, bridges, you name it. And then in 68, President Johnson put a bombing halt on, and we didn't get into North Vietnam. Supplies got into South Vietnam, though, because there was no way to, there was nothing that you could stop them with. They'd come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail and get into South Vietnam. We started Linebacker 1 in 72, and then Linebacker 2 in December of 72. This is the target areas, the areas in question. This is the old French Indochina and different air bases. I was at Udon. The smart bombers were at Ubon. You had Da Nang, the gunfighters. Tak Ly and Karat were where the 105s came out of. And then they had F-4s there in 72. North Vietnam. It was split into 6 different areas, and Area 6, Route Package 6 was split into 2. The Navy had B, the Air Force had A, but since we deconflicted by time, we went everywhere. Tynerian was a steel mill that was a big target. Down in Hanoi, you had the Hanoi Railroad Bridge, and the Paul Duma Ridge. They were big targets. Ban Hoa, the Dragon's Jaw. That was a strategic target. And I think we lost 35 105s, 35, at least 35 or 36 airplanes on it, trying to destroy it, and did not drop the bridge until 72 when the smart bombs came into play. I got to Udon on the 30th of November, 71, about 1:30 in the afternoon. When I got off the Clone, the 130 rotator, the squadron commander for the Nickel would not trade with me to go to the other squadron. He wanted me in his squadron. The squadron commander's name was a guy named Kittinger, Joe Kittinger. He had jumped out of a balloon at 102,000 feet. When I was had a few beers in me, I used to kid him that he'd misread his altimeter 100,000 feet. So I got assigned to the Triple Nickel Squadron, and I went into the squadron and talked to the most important guy there, the scheduler, because if he doesn't know you, you're not flying. And he asked me what my experiences were. And I told him I had 2 years of flying at Seymour, and I could do it, and I had about 650 hours in the F4, and can do anything the F4 could do. And he looked at his watch and said, "Damn, the afternoon goes, have already stepped. You cannot fly today." And I thought that was unusual. I'm not sure I was ready to fly that day, but my checkout program started the next day. And that's how I arrived in Southeast Asia. These are the players, the Phantom and the MiG-21. The F4 is a brute force airplane. It's large. It's got 2 big engines in it. It's very fast, and it carries lots of stuff. MiG-21. The later models, the J model, which you could tell by the dielectric on the top of the tail, had a big engine in it. It had 4 ATOL heat-seeking missiles that it could carry. It had an internal gun and a Sinline gas tank, and it was extremely fast. It could keep up with us, which is how we figured out that they had new airplanes, because the old airplanes couldn't keep up with us. Intel didn't tell us that they had new jets. We found out the hard way. That's the nickel patch, the original nickel patch from 72. It's changed a lot, a couple of times when they went to F-15s, and now that they're flying F-16s, they've redesigned the patch. This is the historic patch. We also had a high-speed FAC program at Laredo, at Udon called Laredo, the Laredo Highway Patrol. And when we finally reconstituted it, because it got shut down because we lost too many people, when it finally got reconstituted, we were running the North Vietnam and spending 4 to 6 hours a day in North Vietnam at low level at 650 knots calibrated, looking for targets. Now, how do you get ready for combat? It was a 4-mission checkout program, especially if you were a young lieutenant or not an F4 guy. You got your 4 missions with no ordnance on board, just local area checkouts. You got a combat qual check on your 10th mission, and then you had additional checkout programs for the different qualification programs we had, either Lorraine bombing, a fast FAC program, or air-to-air. And those check rides were given inside the groups that did those things. And then halfway through your tour, you got a med tour check. When I got ready for my 10th mission check, we didn't have a CFI available. I finally took my 10th mission check to make sure I was combat qualified on my 25th mission on Christmas Day, 1971. I was already waived to do everything anyway. It was just a formality. Low ops tempo, mostly like going to the range in the States, except every once in a while somebody got shot down. Like I said, they terminated the fast FAC program because we lost too many people. We had very limited air-to-air, either launched from the alert pad because we set air-to-air alert, and or either that or flying escorts for B-52s. When we were flying escort for B-52s, they were up at 38,000 feet, cruising at about 220. We're down at about 24,000 feet, trying to keep enough airspeed under us to keep the airplanes flying because we were loaded pretty heavy. And as soon as the B-52 turned and they wouldn't tell us where the turn points were, he was on his own because we couldn't keep up. Well, the air war got more interesting. We reactivated Laredo, 3 pilots, 3 navs. I was the lead gib. And like I said, we used to sit in North Vietnam for 4 to 6 hours a day just looking for targets, running fast. When we got rid of all the pilots in the back seat, the new base regs or wing regs for flying for different qualifications and things in the airplane was, it said that nav backseaters could not land the jets, could not fly close formation, and could not refuel. And you know, nobody read that because I could refuel as well as the pilots could from the back seat. And if I could land the jet, did it on more occasions, and fly close, you couldn't tell who was flying. And because of that, I got to fly with the staff lieutenant colonels who flew 4 hours a month for pay. We had to take them across the fence into Laos to get them a combat mission, and we had to keep them alive and get them home. And I already knew that if anything happened on the airplane that went wrong, maintenance or whatever, it was my fault. The squadron commander already said, don't worry about it. He understood. This was my blood ship in case I got shot down. It was supposed to get me out of harm's way. Unfortunately, I wasn't sure that anybody that found me could read, so I didn't want to meet anybody. Didn't want to get shot down first, but I didn't want to meet anybody. Finally, on the 16th of April, our first mission into Hanoi, they'd recalled the wing. It's 4:30 in the morning. Everybody's half asleep. Nobody knows. Our intel officers, who used to joke with us in the morning to get us awake enough to listen to the intel briefs, are dead serious. Finally, Colonel Gabriel walks in. Gabe was the wing commander, retired as Chief of Staff of the Air Force. He sits down, they pull the curtains away from the briefing boards and say, gentlemen, your target for today is downtown, and pointed to Hanoi. You could hear a pin drop on the floor. You could smell the fear. At the end of the brief, Gabriel gets up and says, guys, we've been waiting for a long time. Let's do a good job. Take a look at the guy sitting next to you. So you and your buddy are looking at each other and he says, you may not be coming home. And you go, damn, that's too bad. Can I have your stereo gear? Nobody got shot down that day. And plus, everybody else's stereo gear was better than yours, so you wanted to upgrade. Our targets for that day were the Paul Doomer Ridge, the Hanoi Railroad Bridge, and the Hanoi Railroad Yards, the Tai Nguyen steel mills. We also dropped the Than Hoa, the Dragon's Jaw, dropped the bridge there. That was a pretty well-built bridge. They had a 105 drop a 3,000-pound bomb and it bounced off the bridge. But we finally dropped it. It's been replaced now. It's pretty modern. This is my map of North Vietnam. This is my nav map that I used. I made this myself. I still have them. And I would keep the map if anything unusual happened on it. Because every once in a while, a 2-star general from PACAF would come in and want to know where in the hell we were at a certain time on a certain date. And I had proof. But this map, it shows 10 May. I got a MiG-21 that day. I was with Steve Ritchie. The flight shot down 2 additional MiGs, and my roommate was shot down. Roger Locker. He spent 23 days on the ground walking down this ridge line till he got far enough south that the helicopter to get to him. 28th August, MiG-21. 8th July, 2 MiG-21s in Banana Valley. And then Phu Quyen Air Base, 1 MiG-21 and 2 MiG-19s. John Madden and I got the MiG-19s, and then number 3 got the MiG-21 with a gun. This map shows azimuth and DME, 10 nautical mile rings, 30 degrees spikes, spokes, and then the Mickey Mouse ears. That's the coverage of the North Vietnamese SA-2 radar sites. So you would, at medium altitude, when you were inside this ring, this area, they could see you and reach you with a radar, with a missile. So you had to have your heads on a swivel.
Chuck, is the bullseye point Hanoi?
Bullseye, Hanoi. Yes, that's Hanoi.
Okay.
And that's how we navigated. It's coordinates off of Hanoi. You 030 for 30, you're there. And it was always off of Hanoi. I'd like to talk about two fights. One is Paula flight on the 8th of July. We were the egress cap. What does that mean? We were the rear guard. We're going in as everybody is coming out. We're going to make sure nobody gets hit. At the time on target, we were about 70 miles west of Hanoi, heading east. Two F-4s called out of Hanoi with firelights. One of them had a fake firelight, which was not unusual, not very common, but not unusual in the F-4. The other one had a real firelight. And both of them were making a lot of noise, get the saw ready. We're on fire. You know, if you got a problem in the middle of the enemy territory, just shut up and head out. Nobody's going to be able to fix it anyway. In fact, in our flights, if you wanted to go home because you had a fire or whatever, the airplane was falling apart, all you had to do is tell lead RTB, return to base. We couldn't fix it, didn't want to know. So as we start heading east faster, northeast of Hanoi are two MiG-21s, and they're heading south and then southwest. We ended up west of Hanoi. We were using Disco, the EC-121. That was our version of the AWACS. And they call merge. Of course, they're about 150 to 200 miles away. Their radar bins are huge. So once we get close to each other, he can't tell. There's no discriminating airplanes. So for about 2 minutes, there's 8 of us with heads on swivels looking at two little bitty airplanes. We were heading northeast, we turned southwest, and as we rolled out southwest, there was a black fly speck on a white cloud. Our signal to the rest of the flight that we were fighting was when we jumped out ahead, when we went to full afterburner and blew the tanks off the airplane. Fight's on. Steve realigned to match up with the dot, and very soon thereafter was a brand new shiny MiG-21 going opposite direction, close enough to see that it was highly polished, and you could see the pilot in the airplane. We knew they didn't fly singles, so this was the first of two. We knew. He comes by us. If it had been an American flying that airplane, he'd turned into us, but it wasn't. It was a Soviet-trained North Vietnamese pilot. He turned away from us. The MiG-21 is a delta wing airplane in a hard level turn speed. So he's slowing down. The F-4 is not an F-16. It is not an 9G airplane. It's an 8.5G airplane if you read the book. If you don't, you can get 12 out of it. And the way to make it turn, do a 180 in it, is to roll it over on its back to 135 degrees of bank. You're at 450 to 500 knots, probably closer to 500. Full afterburner, stick in your lap, in 17 seconds to make a 180. And you'll roll out of it at about 500 knots. It's a high G maneuver using the force of gravity to help you. So we did that, but we held a turn until the second MiG went by us. He comes by us, turns away. He's the shooter. We were supposed to follow the first guy. He was going to shoot us down. That didn't work out very well for him. So since he turned away from us, instead of having to go all the way around the circle to get to him, we cut the circle. We ended up 6,000 feet in trail with him. We got a radar lock on. Now this is an analog system. The radar has to have 2 seconds to settle down and have good information. The missiles need another 2 seconds to get programmed. So it takes lock on plus 4 seconds before you can fire. And I will tell you, that's about 12 eternities. And to make sure we got it right, as soon as the airplane was locked up, you heard 1001, 1002, 1003, 1000, and I screamed fire out of the back seat. In the F-4, you squeeze the trigger, that sets the first missile up. The gas grange generator in the missile starts programming, burning up and getting hydraulic fire on it. Hydraulic foot in the airplane itself kicks the missile off the airplane. It rotates to align the antennas. And as soon as the missile motor fires, the autopilot in the missile is already set. It'll have to fly about 1,000 feet in front of the jet, the F-4, before the missile warhead arms. Otherwise, you can shoot yourself down. But as soon as the first missile kicks off the airplane, the second, if you squeeze the trigger, release and squeeze, as soon as the first missile is gone, the second missile spins up and launches, and you'll get 2 missiles in short order. That guarantees one of them will work. Well, in this case, the first one worked just fine. 6,000 feet away, the missile arcs up at him, cuts the airplane in two, it burns both ends. The second missile went through the fireball. At that point, we unloaded to get our airspeed back, and Tommy Fiesel, our number 4, said, he's on us. So we came back into the fight. We're now 4,000 feet. This is the target. So we're 4,000 feet from him. The third missile, AIM-7 that we fired, it's an F missile. The first time I saw it was an exit of the wingtip area. And I think the missile motor was still burning when it got to him. These guys had flown every day for a month to meet us. We color-coded everything. Red, white, and blue was a MiG-17, MiG-19, MiG-21. Black Bandit was bingo fuel, he's out of gas. Green Bandit was either an ace or nearly an ace. And these were green. That fight took 1 minute and 29 seconds before both of them were dead. And they would not commit 2 more MiGs from the north and 2 MiGs coming up from the south to support. And about 2 minutes after the last missile came off the airplane and that second MiG died, the radar in the F-4 that we had burned itself up and died. So the radar worked just long enough to make everything work. And of course, when you get back to the base after we fly the victory rolls, because we always owned the airfield when we came home from a MiG kill mission, we would call into the tower and tell them to clear the pattern. And we would always start the air show 90 degrees to the runway, looking at the tower, not down at the tower, looking at the tower. Just clear the TV antennas in downtown Udorn. And we shy away so as to miss the tower, but we'd always come down initial at about 200 feet, echelon into the break. And whoever got the MiG kills would pull up and roll. And that was the most dangerous part of the mission, because some days we had 3 airplanes pulling up and rolling. For landing, we'd always come in at 200 feet, 500 knots, and echelon in the break and pitch up and over. It was a great air show for the maintenance people. First thing we'd always do when we land is paint the airplane. Reggie Taylor was the dedicated crew chief for that airplane, did a great job. He could take a screwdriver to the engines on that jet and make sure they burned hot. That was the fastest airplane on base. Chief of maintenance didn't like that much, but we didn't care. My last combat mission came on the 9th of September. We're again flying air to air. I was with John Madden. We're up by Thud Ridge and got told to go orbit Fukien. Fukien is a Soviet-style base. The Soviets keep lots of AAA guns around their air bases. To fly with us or do that, you couldn't be sane, because a sane person would not do that. But to fly with us, we're all probably a little bit off our rockers to do what we did. But they had a MiG-21 coming into Fukien. This is a lithograph that I had made to represent that. The MiG-21 is on final, the gear and flaps down. We have just slowed down from 650 knots. We're now cruising at about between 2 and 250. and we're on the ragged edge because we're still heavy, and we've got 2 AIM-7s left and 4 AIM-9s plus jammers. All the tanks are gone, and we come aboard, and he sees us. We scared him, I think. He picks up his gearing flaps to go around and turns into us. He's out of gas, very lightweight. So he's very maneuverable down at the speeds he's flying at. We're about maybe 500 feet off the deck. Turns into us, and we do 3 leaves of a horizontal rolling scissors, and he pulls up out of the fight, and he's gone. And the F-4 we're flying is a pig. To accelerate the thing, you need to get the nose down, but it's not going very far at 500 feet. So we had to brute force motor out of the area. We commit number 3 in. 3 taxis in behind the MiG. In training, when you're shooting an aerial target, you start shooting at 1,200 feet, you break it off for 1,000. I think he started shooting into about 500 feet and emptied the gun into the guy. And finally the pilot, you could see the bullets speckling all over the jet, and finally the pilot jumps out of the airplane and it falls off on the wing. At that point, we headed back up to Third Ridge to get the flight joined up, because we're offensive as a 4-ship. We're not offensive as either 2-2s or, in our situation, or singles. We head up to Third Ridge. The flight's joined up. We cross the Red River Valley, 15 miles west of Hanoi. And I get a radar blip 8 miles away, 11 o'clock. And it is huge. It looked like they had a radar reflector out there. And that's all I got was 1 blip. We were low on gas. We could not run. We could not outrun them. We had to fight. We saw them before they saw us. We had 90 degrees of turn on them. And number 2 says, "Hey, John, they're 19s. We had never fought 19s before." The guys that flew the MiG-19 were very strong. They had 1 big arm because it didn't have all the hydraulic boosts that the modern jets had, and they're better pilots flew it. So when we had 90 degrees of turn to go, they pickled the tanks off the airplane, got rid of the tanks, and did a brake turn into us and stood it on its tail. We fired 2 AIM-9Js at the number 2 MiG-19, and he was gone. He left the fight. Don't know what happened to him. He ended up crashing before he got back to land. The missile that hit him. The lead MiG-19 was a different story. He was tracking down the back canopy. I think we had 15 seconds before he was going to be bringing 30 millimeter cannon shells at us. The AIM-9Js we had were brand new to the war. They had just come out of a developmental test. We had not put them through operational tests yet. We had them. They had a 10G capability and a 4-to-1 proportional guidance system, a 40G capability and could handle a 10G target. And it was growling. Which told us it saw a heat source. So we fired the missile, and the missile immediately went for what we thought was for the sun. But you know, if you're a duck hunter, you never shoot the duck. You got to shoot in front of the duck, right? Well, the missile was just pulling lead, and it did this hayaka away from us, and then made a turn into it and hit the MiG in the afterburner eyelids. The MiG pilot rolled out from his high G turn, rolled wings level, rolled inverted, and did a split S. He was at 1,200 feet, but a very nice split S for the first 90 degrees. As soon as that was over with, as soon as he hit the ground, the AAA came up. 37, 23, 57, 85 millimeter. Each one makes a distinctive flak pattern. 1, 2, and 3 were low enough to get under it. 4 was a little high. He got hit in the fuel cells, and he left Hanoi with 1,800 pounds of fuel. At Atom cruise, the airplane burns 100 pounds of fuel a minute. So if he was at Atom altitude and airspeed, he had about 18 minutes of flying time left. At the speeds we were flying, he maybe had 5 minutes. We sent number 3 with him, and they went straight ahead and leveled off when they got to 1,000 feet. By that time, they cleaned the airplane off of everything they could get rid of and ran it out of gas. And the two guys in the cockpit had a fight over who was going to pull the ejection handle. If the front seater pulls it, the back seater goes first. The back seater has the option. He can either go by himself or have the pilot follow him out. So they ended up making individual ejections. You know, it's not often you get to pull the handle on a perfectly good airplane and get rid of it. We stayed behind. We took two with us. We went to spread formation and then did tactical weaves to make sure nobody followed them out. And as soon as we got out of the target area, we went to the heavens. Got as high as that airplane could go and just meandered back to Udorn. We decided not to go for a tanker. We didn't have gas to try to hit the tanker and miss. We decided we had just enough gas to get home. So at about 80 miles out, we started the half nozzle descent where you take the back end of the engine, the nozzles, and you get them to where they read half. We have a gauge in the airplane, and that gives you your best glide angle, best glide distance. And we just kind of meandered home, just falling out of the sky. We came over Vientiane, Laos at about 10,000 feet. There's a restricted area over Vientiane where we couldn't fly because that's where the embassies were. And we didn't care. We were right over the town. As we were turning on final, we took spacing, rolled out on final, gear up, flaps up, got to short final, gear up, short final, gear down, flaps down, land. And I think we may have killed an engine on rollout just to make sure we didn't run out of gas on the runway and block it. But that was my final mission. It was Olds 4, like I said, got hit and crashed in Laos. Olds 5, our airborne spare, he always stayed on the tanker and acted as a radio relay in case we needed something, coordinated the SAR. So when they punched out, he flew over them. The helicopter was already in the area and they were on the ground 20 minutes. So we didn't have a victory rolls. We didn't put on an airship until after he landed. And by the time we got back, it was dark. But John Madden, myself, Bill Dalecki, Terry Murphy, they were that shot down and now they were back with us. Tibbetts and Bud Hargrove, they got the MiG with the gun. They got another MiG later on, and then they got killed in a training accident, post-mission training accident. The next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, I was on an airplane headed back to the States. I was not no longer allowed to fly combat, and they sent me home with the 2-star, and Richie was leaving the next day, so they put me on the same airplane. The Nichols score in 72 was 20 MiG kills. We guaranteed results. That added to the 20 MiG kills that we had from Rolling Thunder days. Now I've seen somewhere where it wasn't 40 kills total, but 39. Still made us the leading squadron. The F4 I flew, 463, had 6 kills on it. They all belong to the airplane. I've got 2 of those kills. So there were 3 Air Force aces. I have 6 kills. Richie has 5. Jeff Feinstein from the 13th Squadron also has 5. And the 2 Navy aces, Randy Cunningham and Willie Driscoll, have 5 kills altogether. They were married up on the ship. If you do everything right, at the end of the war, you get to do this. And that's my bird that I flew all the time. It was perfect. Hot. The engines ran hot. Everything worked on it, and I could get it fixed even if it wasn't broken. This is a team that made it happen. It's Reggie Taylor, Staff Sergeant. He took care of the jet. We walked up to it, and he said it was ready. It was ready. He said it wasn't ready. You can go back and have coffee. If you do everything right, you get to advertise. It does pay to advertise. For one thing, people will buy you beer. This party suit of mine did not fit about 3 weeks after I left Udon. The Indian tailor that made it did not use an extra thread. This sits in the Air Force Museum right across from Olds Airplane. Robert Olds Airplane. So what lessons did we learn? We started Red Flag. That gets you over your first 10 missions of nervousness that you have. The worst missions you fly in combat, especially if you're in heavy combat, is the first 10 because you don't know what you're doing, and the last 10 because you do know what you're doing. We added the similar air combat tactics. The first time I'd flown an air-to-air mission against a dissimilar airplane was a MiG-21, and it was south of Hanoi. That's criminal. And you can't give the enemy a sanctuary. Make sure he has no place to hide. All the Army and Air Force generals in Desert Storm were been baptized in combat in Vietnam. They didn't want to make the same mistakes twice. They had to convince the Navy Admiral that we weren't going to do it the way the Admiral wanted. He wanted to turn it into group packages like Vietnam was. What were our core values? Integrity. Tell somebody you can do something, do it. Discipline. It is a military organization. We demanded absolute discipline. Leadership and followership. If you got no followers, you're not a leader. And if they won't follow you, you're not the leader. So it takes both groups to make it work. Teamwork. It is a team sport. And it's not just the guys in the airplane. It's the guys on the ground and the gals on the ground that make it happen. They keep the airplanes peaked up. They take care of the missiles to make sure they're working. And our missiles were absolutely perfect. And, even the cook, and you might say, why the cook? Well, breakfast is at 4. If I didn't get breakfast at 4, supper was at 6 that next evening, because I was always in the air for lunch. So the cook was important. The glue that held it all together was training. You're going to train like you're going to fight. But if you're training bad, as the North Vietnamese did that on the 8th of July, if your training's bad, it's a telling event. It doesn't take long to figure it out. And that's the jet we flew. It sits at the Air Force Academy. The cadets there, it's on the Trotso next to the path to the dining hall. So the younger cadets, when they march to class or to meals, they see it 3 times a day. And I'm probably taking a little bit too much time. I'm sorry, but if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Chuck, thanks, man. That was great. That's a great piece of history, Air Force history and human history, and we appreciate you being with us. I have a couple of questions teed up on the chat. Let me ask you a question. And maybe this is down in the weeds too much, but the AIM-7 radar missile that you got 4 kills with it. Had a pretty bad reputation as for reliability and performance in Vietnam. So a couple things. Could you talk a little bit about the weapons you had available on the F4, and then about the AIM-7 specifically? And did you guys do something different to make that a better performing missile than might have been other places?
The F4 could carry 4 AIM-7s, and then we could carry either AIM-4s, which we had initially, or 4 AIM-9s. And the AIM-4 was a heat-seeking, radar-guided heat-seeking missile, and which wasn't very much useful to us because it didn't have a it needed a hit to kill, no proximity fuse, and it was developed for a bomber target. So we got rid of all those missiles. The AIM-7s, it's a tube missile. So if you keep slamming it on the runway, and if you don't use it very much, they don't maintain it, it's ballast. So during the 4 years that we weren't going into Hanoi every day, they just left the missiles languish on the airplanes. Whereas when we started using the missiles daily, we dedicated some airplanes for air-to-air, some of the F4s, the ones that were modified for enemy IFF, were all totally dedicated to air-to-air. They didn't carry bombs. So those airplanes had special attention with their missiles. On my jet, the missiles stayed on the airplane 10 rides. If I hadn't used it, they came off the airplane. They went back to maintenance, and they tweaked the missiles up, and I got the same missiles the next morning on my jet. They had improved Navy fusing. They had a dogfight mode in them so they could dogfight. They weren't just looking for a bomber target. And we had very good, once we started using them and working with munitions maintenance on the care and feeding of those missiles, we had very good luck with them. We stopped firing 2 missiles to get a kill. We started conserving missiles. And the AIM-9s, initially we had AIM-9Es, which were okay. Then we got AIM-9Js. They could really do a job. They were a hard turning missile. They were built by Philco Ford. And when we got the missiles, we got the Philco Ford tech rep in with us. And the first time we called in, we'd used his AIM-9s to get 2 kills. He bought the bar for an hour. Unfortunately, we were so drunk by the end of the hour, we never turned it off.
Chuck, can you take down your screen so I can see? Go back to gallery view and I can see raised hands. And I got a couple of questions I'll throw out. So one of our audience members said in reference to your crew chief, Sergeant Taylor, I think, said, did you stay in touch with him? You ever had any contact with him after Vietnam?
For about 10 years, yes. I've lost contact with him. He was a staff sergeant crew chief. Luck of the draw, he drew that airplane.
Yeah.
But, oh my God, he could make a thing sing.
Yeah. Teamwork. Another question Mark Liebman asked, he said, had a similar question. Early in the war, the Navy created Fighter Weapons School Top Gun program. And of course, we did Red Flag and the aggressors and all that stuff. Said, what did your squadron go through to improve the ACM capabilities of individual crews? Of course, I guess you had what you had when you got to Vietnam.
You had what you had when you got to Vietnam. And the Top Gun, the Navy Weapons School, was developed before the end of the war, before 72. The Air Force Fighter Weapons School didn't get into doing too much until after the war. And all the guys in the weapons school was TDY'd to the war anyway, to help out. What we did, we were all trained air to ground. I had never flown against a different kind of airplane in a dogfight. It was always F4 against F4, which all you're doing is, it's the 2 pilots are fighting each other. When you put me up against another airplane, now I've got to fight the system. I got to maxiform my airplane and put him in a disadvantage. And we were lacking in that capability. So we borrowed 2 F-8s from the Navy. They came out to Udon on R&R, and they flew 2 ships Soviet tactics against us. And after 2 weeks of flying against them, they're still beating us. They would bingo out 2 flights of F-4s and dump gas to land.
Wow.
Yeah, it's got 1 J-79 in it and 11,000 pounds of fuel. So I was with John Madden, and we were going into Hanoi, and the deal was, if we didn't get launched, we were going to launch the F-8s. If we didn't get attacked into a fight. And we didn't get in a fight, and we still had our wing tanks on board, and we decided we didn't want the wing tanks on board to fight the F-8s. So we got rid of the wing tanks, launched the F-8s. And by the way, it's big boy rules. Everybody's armed hot. Do not squeeze the trigger. And we met them west of Udon. And we're in the mountains at about maybe 400 or 500 feet off the deck in the mountains. And they call tally-ho. We're 18 miles apart. I had a IFF return from them, a radar return also. And you could tell it wasn't a refined return, but it was enough to know it was them. And we beat them that day. And we had proved out our tactics. And so we had to have our own training program. They only stayed there about 3 weeks, and then they went back to the boat.
Great. Mark, Mark Liebman, I see a hand up. You're on mute, Mark.
You mentioned that you lost a bunch of airplanes in the Laredo emissions. Was that due to AAA, or was it due to the guys flying in the mountains at a high rate of knots? Because you said you were going 600 knots. First question is, what the hell can you see? And the second thing is, you're navigating down in the weeds, and it's real easy to run into something hard.
We would go through the passes at that speed, at 300 feet or so. It's the first time you do it, you don't see anything. The second time you do it, not much. About the third or fourth time, you're picking out trucks and gomers and supplies. Your mind has to speed up. The losses came from, well, some of them were AAA. Some of them we're not sure. They just didn't come back. And once we got out of the mountains into the flats looking for targets, we were in SAM country, surface air missiles, AAA, a lot of things. Probably not too many MiGs for what we were doing, but AAA and SAMs were a big problem. If you didn't see the SAM, it was deadly. If you did see the SAM, you could defeat it. But
Chuck,
if you didn't keep your cool, if you had to stop and think about what you were doing, you're probably too late. You had to react.
Chuck, how would you, you mentioned briefly, how would you assess the skills of the North Vietnamese pilot, I guess an occasional Soviet pilot also?
The older heads that have been there a while, especially those that are still alive, that were the first 50 that went to Russia for pilot training, they were pretty good. In fact, they had the ability to blow off their GCI controller. Young lieutenant, our lieutenants were a lot better than theirs were. They couldn't think. They were tied to a guy on the ground who was reading the checklist to them and telling them what to do. We got a friend of mine got a MiG. There was a two-ship, and when they ended up attacking them, the flight lead did a hayaka out of the fight. The young lieutenant was in a 30-degree bank turn waiting for somebody to talk to him. But he did.
Great. Any other questions? I can only see half the audience. Bob Gaybar.
Well, I had a question that was directed to me, John, so let me read it to you. It's from Virginia Bennett. My husband, Major Thomas S. Bennett, was stationed at Utapao from August 71 to July 72 and planned sorties to refuel the fighters and bombers. First question, how many times would your plane need to be refueled during the flight? And two, did the tankers come into Vietnam to refuel?
On a normal MiG-cap air-to-air mission, linebacker mission from Udon, we would take off. The tanker track would be maybe 15 miles away. On a number of occasions, as we turned onto the runway and I turned the radar on, I got the tanker on board. I could lock onto the tanker. We hadn't even rolled down the runway yet. We would go immediately to a pre-contact position. The tanker cell had probably 5 tankers in it, and they would meander around picking up chicks. And as soon as all 5 tankers was full of F4s, they would head north, and you would refuel until the tanker got to the northern anchor, and he anchored there. That was probably in somewhere in Laos, not very far in Laos, but in Laos. And we would drop off in Laos with a full load of gas. And the important things to do at that point was, when you came off the tanker, turn the radar back on, get the missile cooking again, get the Sinlang tank feeding. We wanted to feed out the Sinlang tank so that it would, because once it went dry, we kicked it off the airplane. And it was aerodynamic. So if it had gas in it that was sloshing around, you had a good possibility of taking the bottom of the airplane out. So you had to be very careful doing that. Initially, we'd go into a slow to about 300 knots, get a 1.3 G pull on the airplane and kick it off. Then we found out if you just kick it off like wing tanks, it always went the other way. And coming out of Hanoi, if we had to, we'd hit a tanker. we wouldn't bother with the tanker unless we couldn't get home. And on a couple of occasions when we came out of Hanoi on my first mission with a kill when my roommate was shot down. We had to accelerate away from a MiG and we were above 1,000 miles an hour, about 200 feet off the deck. And the MiG stayed with us. That was our intel. They had new MiGs. When we finally hooked up with the tanker, there were 3 of us left, and we had 2,400 pounds of fuel in 3 airplanes. So if that tanker had not come north to get us, and he had to make a decision to come further north than he wanted to, than he was allowed to come get us, we wouldn't be here.
Okay. Just so you know, I can only see about 1/3 of the participants, so I won't see, you may not see any raised hands. Anybody got another question? Okay. We don't have any.
It's been a pleasure talking to everybody. I hope this was informative. It helps me relive something I did 50 years ago.
Chuck, let me put my screen back up. I want to make some closing comments here. Number one, we thank you for being with us, Chuck. This was, as I said, a great part of our heritage, and it's great to hear. It's always great to hear war stories. You should have in your mailbox or
It already arrived.
Already arrived. Okay. Well, this is for those who don't know, this is the Texas Aerospace Education Foundation Mustang Fellow Award. It's given by the Texas Aerospace Education Foundation, which is dedicated to fostering new leaders for the Air and Space Force. So you get this, the AEF gets a $50 donation from the Seidel Chapter in your name as a thank you for being with us. You also probably then got the challenge coin, AEF challenge coin and lapel pin. And you'll have on your way, on its way, the Seidel Chapter challenge coin. So I know you probably don't have any challenge coins, so this will be only about 5,000 of them, I imagine.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a new addition to our repertoire, and we're glad to have you.
Well, what I do, and what a lot of my friends do is, and what you guys do is give back. And we give back to society. Damn. We give back to society for the benefits that we've gotten out of this country and for the pleasure to have served this great country in uniform.
Amen. I meant to mention a personal remark. When I was a young T-38 instructor pilot at Williams Air Force Base in 1973, Captain DeBellevue showed up as a student. I got to fly with him a couple times. But I'll tell you what a remarkable thing it was for the kids, his classmates, to have a guy like that in their class, and for the instructors who were stuck at Willie Air Patch to be around a guy like that. So, and I noticed, by the way, Chuck, I mentioned this was our 50th anniversary of my class out there, and I saw one of my classmates on another screen. So we had that Tipper connection from a long way back.
Yeah.
Good. Folks, that is it. I hope this was enjoyable. And again, Chuck, we thank you for being with us, and I hope everybody stays safe, and we'll do this in person, hopefully early in 2021. So thank you.
And let me just add to, we will have up on our website and a link to the recording. I know there's several people wanted to be on today that weren't able to be on. So if you know anybody that you think would enjoy this, you can send them the link. It's out on the cloud, and they can watch the whole program.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
You bet.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck, and thank you, John. That was great. Appreciate it.